Welcome to the Sober Living Stories podcast. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of sobriety. We shine a spotlight on individuals who have faced the challenges of alcoholism and addiction and are today living out their best lives sober. Each guest has experienced incredible transformation and are here to share their story with you. I'm Jessica Stepanovic, your host. Join me each week as guests from all walks of life share their stories to inspire and provide hope to those who need it most. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Sober Living Stories podcast. My guest today is Claire George. Claire holds not one, but 2 master's degrees and helps individuals not only change their habits, their behavior, but then intentionally change their life. She is also the host of the Health Habits Coach podcast, and she's here today to share her personal story. Claire, we connected on an online platform where we resonated with one another on your upbringing and how it shaped you into who you are today. So please just jump in and go as far back as you'd like, and we're happy to hear your personal story today.
Oh, well, thank you. And first, thanks so much. It's really lovely to be here. It's an amazing podcast that you have created, and giving people an opportunity to both share their stories and hear others' stories is such a huge part of our lives, but also our health journeys and healing from aspects of a health journey that have been a struggle and hard. So thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with everyone. And I think to begin with, I think I'll separate out from the Health Habits Coach identity, because that's a very different sort of world almost to the one I think we're really trying to explore today, which is around my own personal story and life and upbringing. My father, was an alcoholic, and but to go, I think, to kind of give a sense of the scene, to set the scene, as it were. I really need to kind of explain that my mum was quite a formidable woman. She was only 5'4", but she was the daughter of a farmer, and he wanted a son, but he didn't have a son to take over. So she ended up, by the time she was 16, she was a butcher and running a butcher shop. By the time she was 17, she was buying a diamond. This is in rural England. And by the time she was 18, she was driving her soft top little car off to Rome. So this was my mum. She meets a local chap who's my birth, blood father, and they have, she's pregnant twice, but second, I'm a twin, so she'd got 3 children by the time she was sort of 24, and then she met someone, another local man, and fell in love, and in that forthright way, just because at the time that was a very unusual thing to do in the very early 70s, and so she ended her marriage, and they moved in together, and then this is my stepfather, but I was then, what happened was he had 2 daughters, my mum, the 3 children, myself and my 2 siblings, and the 5 of us were within 23 months of age, and the 5 of us, because of mental health issues for my stepfather at the time, for his wife, and the mother of his 2 children, had real challenging. So what ended up happening was we became this blended family, which was again unusual. And 5 children. There wasn't those. I don't know. We were in England. There wasn't the Brady Bunch. I don't know if that was there then, but it was kind of like that. And it was like we were this big gang, and we, in the 70s, they used to dress you all the same. So instead of so you'd expect it with a twin to be dressed like your twin, but I was literally dressed like the other, because there was 4 girls and 1 boy. And the 4 girls, we'd be dressed identical. Even my brother would be dressed in the same colours, shorts. So it was really kind of, But anyway, and we became this blended family. And then when I was 5, my stepfather, in essence, Mike Foy, who my name became Claire Foy. I changed my name. We became formally adopted. And he was very social, and that's where it was at that stage. It was, but he was more social and more of a, drink was more of a part of our life than for a typical family, I would say. And but my memories are sort of here and there, but by the time I was 7 or 8, I really had a sense and an awareness that my father drank in a way that most didn't, and that it wasn't seen as a good thing. And that's all I can really say about that. I don't, there wasn't heavy judgment. It was the 70s. It was the era of love and acceptance. It really was. And then everyone was having a good time, but there was definitely far more alcohol than most people would think was healthy. And but then by the time we were sort of 9, 10, it had really progressed and become a situation where, yeah, he was just, I never saw him. And I didn't really see my mum because she was always working, earning the money to pay the bills. And there was 5 kids. And oh, I didn't mention that when I was 5 years old, so they'd only been together 18 months, 2 years. There was a love child, my half sister, Kate. So there was 6 of us. 5 girls, 1 boy. I'm a twin. I got my other, half sister, my sister. We grew up really, truly as sisters, brothers. We didn't think or let alone talk in those terms. And yeah, so I had 3. I was like one of a triplet in a very small village school. It just felt my sisters, my family were just all around me. They're just a pack, a crew. And but yeah, it did start to, when it really started to shift was around when I was around 10, 11. And that's when it shifted. And I think fundamentally it shifted because my mum, by this point, she was just, really struggling, I think, to keep everything going and all the extra work and responsibilities that were on her. And so lots of aspects of relationship breakdown kind of came into our family dynamics in lots of ways. And I think this was definitely the trigger. That was my father's alcoholic kind of behaviors and then the consequences of those. But there was a lot of different things going on. So it was really messy and hard, but at the same time, it was a really simple life because we never went anywhere. Partly because I don't think people particularly wanted to invite a family with 6 kids, honestly. 6 young kids. Like it's a crowd. It's an event. So
it's an event, yeah.
We compared to most people, we're living in a village in Shropshire in England. So my childhood was I was really into animals and nature, and we were farming families, so that was easy. And so that's where I definitely saw my solace, and I definitely, have very vivid memories of talking about our dad's drinking patterns and habits and that, by the time I was 9, 10. And but by the time we were 10, 11, we were taking bottles. They'd have parties. They'd have big parties, my parents and myself and my siblings. We thought it was hilarious to take a load of booze, hide it under our beds, and then literally we knew that they'd always lie in on a Sunday morning, and so we'd just go and invite our friends after Sunday school when we were 10 to come and meet us down it was called the Rock Hole. It was like a little field spot. And yeah, and so we were then encouraging our 10-year-old friends to drink. And so obviously I look back on things like that and have a real sense of responsibility and, it's not shame. I don't have shame on that, but I definitely feel like, wow, I really wasn't a good influence and that wasn't a good influence on me. And then the ripple effect and the ways in which one person's actions altered and, the health and the well-being for so many. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you can see that. So yeah, that's an interesting point that you don't have shame in it because it was not your doing, but it was just your modeling. So when you had said that it shifted when you were 10, what was a characteristic or things that happened within your house that you knew your father's drinking shifted? Was it just his absence that alerted you to, and did you have to take care of yourselves or?
We always had to take care of ourselves. By the time I was 7, 8, I was washing my own laundry, doing my own cooking, getting myself up after school. It was only a couple of minutes walk, so it was quite easy. But, stuff like that back in that's the mid-70s, that was not normal. It wasn't normal to have a mum that worked all hours, 6 days a week. And then on her off time was in the pub with your dad having a drink. And then when you had the 1 or 2 weeks holiday a year, it was spent in pubs, sitting with your packet of crisps and your little bottle of Coke and playing cards or dominoes. And I just got to know hundreds and hundreds of pubs in my childhood. And that's the only memory I have, a completely only memory I have of my father and my mother. It was particular. It was a very strange. It's one of those things that I often think of when people say, "Oh, what's it like to have like a famous parent?" And that's what when people used to say, "Oh, well, I don't know, they're just my mom," and I used to think that I really resonated with that. I just used to think, this is not normal. It's not typical. It's not what I want. There's nothing I can do. So it was very disempowering. But in terms of going to your question about what shifts, there wasn't big arguments. I think I can only really remember 2 or 3 arguments. My dad he was a really sweet guy. He was Irish. He was fun-loving. He was sociable. He was, and I am saying was because unfortunately he did pass away from alcohol, from his addiction in my late 20s. So another sort of 20 years, but spent a long time, spent 10, 15 years in that sort of sad movie But at this phase, when I'm 10 years old, it wasn't like that. It wasn't particularly functional. And so I think that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a shift. He wasn't even attempting to try and work in the business. He was literally just at the pub. He'd sort of get up. He'd have bottles of booze in the bedroom. That kind of level of alcohol and drunkenness. He had a couple of incidents. Like I was definitely at junior school, so around 10, and he crashed his car. And I remember him being so worried that he was going to get caught, and that they find out that he'd got the alcohol in his blood. I remember things like that. I remember him falling over and getting a black eye and things. There were certain things like this that had gone beyond. It was no longer under management. It was no longer functioning. And that's what sort of shifted. But it was a few years later. It was not until they did a trial separation when I was about 13. And I think this is the thing to kind of point out is that there's living with someone with, and then once everyone knows, and once it's gone into that space where it's not even functioning, but it carried on. And I think that was the only part that was damaging in terms of to us as children. I think I can only obviously speak for my own personal feelings, but based on my siblings' comments, I think it's fair to say that up until we were 10 or 11, we just thought, oh, it's not ideal, but it's how he is. And then obviously maturity, getting older, being able to understand a bit more. And seeing how ill he was. It's just horrible.
Yeah. And I think listeners can relate, not that, we have people on I've only had 1 or 2 other guests who talked about it from the perspective that you're speaking about it, not you suffering from the disease of alcoholism or addiction, but somebody that you love. And, your father being, or your stepfather, correct? Yeah. And you had used the word ill, and a lot of people don't look at alcoholism as an illness, although it's a disease. And but I think it's important to note, as 10, you said, well, this is the way it is. But then as you mature, you start to think, how did that affect relationships in high school? How did you do in high school?
Yeah, once we started going through puberty, and that's when the relationship between my father and my mother broke down really fully. And so they were living in the same house, and that's when I think for us, all 5 of us within 23 months, so we're all going through puberty at the same time, and 5 girls. So yeah, it was intense, and everybody reacted very strongly, I think is fair to say, and differently. So I was I'm going to run away and rule the world not rule the world, actually explore the world, I think is a fair thing to say. But I was going to be an explorer, and I was going to get away by being independent and by being self-sufficient. And that was definitely the identity I forged as a coping mechanism, I'd say. I had another sibling who forged the identity of sort of men and sort of sex and underage and had so was pregnant by the time she was 16, and then second pregnancy at 17. And we were a very middle class family, so this was that was almost one of the most embarrassing things. And that it's things like that actually that are really bizarre, because like we've never been apparently needed to be embarrassed about our dad and his drinking, or my mum and her drinking. She wasn't exactly a non-drinker, but we're meant to be embarrassed because our sister is pregnant at 16. So it's things like that are really kind of. And then by the time, so I was really into my sport, but I was a real tomboy. So I really developed late in the sense of high school. I was really quiet. I wasn't massively studious. I was more into my animals and sport. But it's this identity of I'm going to get away. I'm just going to get through this. And then when I get to being an adult, I'm going to explore the world. I'm going. That was in my heart. And so I did do geography, geology, biology in high school, like college level. So I was obviously trying to put in place some of that stuff. But yeah, it was really strange because my mom has her own set of issues, not related to alcohol. Well, I don't know, not as strongly related to alcohol, but mental health and well-being. And as a result, she took the approach of divide and conquer, I think, between us siblings. And so there was a lot of times where we were set against each other. So it became really, really just heartbreaking. And one of my other sisters, anorexia nervosa, was given 24 hours to live. Did 2 very extended, I don't know, 9 months in a hospital. So yeah, the impacts were, but none of it was spoken about as being related. And I think that's what then created a challenge and a block in healing, in trying to heal.
Sure. And you talked about, your siblings having, their different identities. But did you also, in a sense, before you had the division of your siblings as far as within the household, did you all comfort and have some sort of support with one another as you grew up in your home?
Sort of, not really. We were all just, my mum's mantra was survival of the fittest. She was a butcher. She was a farmer's daughter who raised, just post-war. She had a very masculine energy, I'd say. Well, she has, I should say, because my mum's still very much with us, and she still is very masculine energy. And bless her. And yeah, no, she, so I don't think so. I think I don't think there was much of that. It was just a very lonely childhood emotionally. Very, very lonely. There was never a hug. There was never a you're loved, like never. Like not occasionally or something. And then for me, myself, there was abuse, and also for other siblings. And it was just hard and horrible. And and I did get to go. And I did end up doing a degree in psychology, probably because I wanted to try and make sense of it all. But then as soon as I'd finished my degree, I got on a plane, a one-way ticket to Beijing in 1994 on my own.
You did. And you left.
And yeah, and that was not a normal thing.
That was not what?
That's not a normal thing to do, but I got to start living my dreams. I got to start doing those things that I'd been imagining. And I had a map of the world when I was like 9. And it was the only thing in our whole bedroom besides beds and a couple of chests of drawers was this.
So how did that look? So what did you do after high school?
So I went and I did a degree. I was a serial monogamist. I didn't trust men. I didn't trust myself. I was drinking quite a bit socially, but not. I've always been quite liking a bit of control, I think. So I had already left home twice. The first time was when I was 14. I then left home again at 16 to live with a then boyfriend, which again was just really strange because I was hanging out with very middle class people and it was just really odd. And so, yeah, it was just the whole thing was very messy and really, truly, I can't put it into a sentence to describe it, but it was a phase. It was a season. We all came the other side of it. We all survived, but the other side of it, we were left very fragmented. My parents had divorced when I was about 18. They did divorce and were financially separated and all that. So that became some closure for their marriage in that side of things. But then my mum moved into a divisive kind of approach. And so our dad wasn't really supported. He was on his own. Each of us were on our own. That's how I describe it. So unfortunately, no, there was obviously opportunities with so many siblings to support each other, but I can't say that I can only speak for myself, but I don't think anyone felt particularly supportive.
You can see how when one parent has alcoholism, how it has such a ripple effect on the entire family and in creating your identities and who you are. And so you chose to explore, you had that map in your room and you were kind of devising like a plan early on and to go. And it sounds like you did that because you've been to many places, haven't you? In your adult life.
Yeah, no, I just went. I solo traveled from all over Amazon to the Himalaya, Atacama to the Gobi deserts. Like I've really, and then I really got into volunteering. I think my response to my childhood was one of, compassion and heart and very sensitive, very, very sensitive.
Let's take a moment to hear a recovery story from one of my sponsors. At the age of 25, recently married and a new father, Jack found himself in a Texas rehab facility detoxing. After 10 years of addiction, he was finally able to admit that it was time to get help. Not only did SoberLink allow him to be accountable and track his sobriety, SoberLink allowed Jack to prove to himself and others that he could make the change he had always hoped for. SoberLink is the portable sobriety tracker, taking the recovery world by storm. It has built-in facial recognition, sensors that detect cheating, and instant results sent to contacts. It's the #1 accountability tool for keeping yourself honest and rebuilding trust. Visit www.soberlink.com/sober-living and check out the show notes to click the link and receive $50 off your device today. Now back to our guest.
So on the one hand, I'm very open. And that's the thing, it makes me think of Macklemore, the artist. And he talks about this in one of the lyrics of one of his songs about how, because I was really open, like he'd be like, oh yeah, come do this and I'll do this for you. And that's how I am as a person. So people make assumptions, whereas actually what they don't necessarily know is that I'm keeping the real parts of me very, very hidden, very hidden, because I am not going to give my heart because I don't want it to get broken. I don't want it to get hurt. So that's what I think was the real thing that for all of half a century of my life.
Right. Yeah. Well, you went on to get 2 master's degrees, which, not everyone does. And so you academically went really far. And, but I think it's interesting because you have the Health Habits Coach podcast and today you help individuals, with creating habits that allow them to get back into their life and succeed. And so I think it's interesting because when you were talking about when you were 10, you actually use the word habits. You notice some different habits shifting in your home and within your parents and stuff. So it's like from an early age, you had that awareness of, habits and how people are acting and you've taken that and created it into something that is now helping others, So could you talk a little bit about how you got into the career you got into today, coming from your education and such?
I think you've woven together elements there beautifully, Jessica. I think that's exactly how it was. It's like I've got this big, huge heart that I want to share, but just not too deeply. No, but, like, you know, like it's always a bit complex, these things. But yeah, I just I got that inner explorer, pioneer. I've got all this. It is a real confidence. I know that I can survive. I know that I got this. I've got this. And so when I got slammed with a tick bite in 2011, I mean, yes, I had done my psychology degree, my first, which I will add was really unusual. I was the only person in my whole school that was going to do, and it was like, what's that? You know, your friends. Like, we have to remember the times that in which I was doing the things that I was doing were really unusual. And people would say, you're so brave to go off to China on your own. I'd be like, oh, is it? I've just survived that childhood, honestly. And I don't mean to joke to light of it. I'm sure you get that it's very, very big and heart and serious topic. But yeah, definitely problems are opportunities. And what I learned was, you know what? It's opened up my eyes and it's given me the push to go seek and go do. And I definitely have always been a detailed oriented person. My only ever, I promise you this, like my only ever Christmas gift, because my mom just used to write us checks. But my only ever Christmas gift was from one of my aunts, that wasn't money, was the Book of Why. And it was this big encyclopedia of why. Because she was like, all you ever do is say why, but why, but why? So it makes complete sense that then 10 years later I'm doing a degree. It made total sense that I then went and traveled the world. What I wanted to do, but saw all these very ordinary people with a lot less than myself doing extraordinary things. And it was so uplifting. It was so freeing to be in other cultures, to experience other ways of thinking. It's just the most brilliant thing for anybody who has, and that's one of the biggest bits of advice I could give, is just go place yourself with other people, other places, you know, because it's so healing. And it was for me. And so then I wanted to give back, you know, this heart. And so I did my first master's in social program development, all about design. But then I went and got a tick bite, and I got another crash on life, as does happen. And back in 2011, I was in New York City, and so not the tick bite, that was up in Vermont. But I'd only just moved there. So it completely, that was my life, autoimmune for about 3 years, and to bring it all forward. So this is why. And then I got fit again, and I fell in love with tennis, and I love tennis like, oh my gosh, like a 14-year-old loves their favorite pop star. I just absolutely immersed and in love with tennis. And that love, that heart in that subject lifted my health, my fitness, and my habits around that. Recovery from Lyme, all this knowledge, all this professional experience, personal experience. I brought it all together. And then, I did a master's. The pandemic hit, and I was like, okay, let's do one more master's, because I like to be thorough. I like to really feel like I've got the skill set to help the people I'm trying to help. So I did my master's in health psychology a couple of years ago. And since then, I've coached. I was just totting it up. I've actually coached more than 5,000 people personally.
Wow, that's a lot of people. That is a lot. I did not know that. That's incredible.
It's brilliant that's my story. That's the story. And it isn't just to do with obviously one person, my father. It's to do with the whole stuff and everything that we do. And there's a lot more hardship and suffering ahead for me, because there is for all of us. And there's a lot more triumphs and discovery and just, you know, just brilliant moments, you know. And I know, to go back to Macklemore again, I just think, like these, you know, maybe right now, these are the good old days. And I love that ethos that, you know, we think that the good old days are behind us, that we've lived them. And that's what I think as a woman in my 50s. I'm like, no, they're not. Like, there's so much more. There's so much more that lies ahead. And I think that's what I bring in my coaching groups, whether I'm online, whether I'm in person. You know, I've literally helped thousands of people prevent type 2 diabetes and, you know, get their blood glucose, their cholesterol, you know, so sometimes it's very physical like that. But I've also coached 1,000 people with complex medical health, where I map their landscapes. I really get into the nitty gritty of their story and the story of their trauma that then is all part of their health experience. And that's health psychology. It's behavior change to enable you to improve your quality of life, because health isn't just about the measurables. It is about how we feel, and it's about, so that's basically what I do now, sort of day to day, day in, day out, and I love it.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, that's great. And I love how you said that you fell in love with, after you had gotten sick. I love how you said when you started to get fit again, you fell in love with tennis, and it lifted, like it just kind of, you doing that sport that you love just kind of boosted you back up. And it made me think of, how many listeners are just, getting themselves back together, and what can they fall in love with that they can pour into so that it can kind of spill over into their other parts of their life and get that positivity back and that health back, and it doesn't necessarily, and that was a sport. It was a side sport that you did and you used your time at, and it really trickled over into making you regain your health. And again, I think that's really great.
Oh, I think so. I think that I don't know. There's a couple. I found out only at the holidays just a few months ago. So I'd already gone through this and spoken about tennis in that exact way. And then I found out that I'm on that human design. I did a bit of that with someone, and they told me I've got the oh gosh, now I'm going to go and forget it. It's a really strange name, but it's like my 4 chambers of the heart, the cross, the incarnation cross. That's it, of human design. And all 4 of mine is the heart. And what that means is that if you really work on your heart, like your love, your heart, then you really get to experience love in anything, in a leaf, in a sport, in food, and then you start to realize, actually, this is available to me right now, no matter what is going on the rest of my world. It's not to make light of it. It's really not. I have tremendous challenges, and some of the biggest I've had to face as a human being in the last 12 months that have come into my life. So I'm not trying to, I need to mention that because I don't like to be disingenuous, like, oh, everything's fine now. Life isn't like that in my view. It's hard, but if you can develop your heart and develop your love, then you always feel alive and you feel connected. And that is really what I think health and well-being is. That's what keeps us rising, sort of thing.
When you talked about volunteering, and with alcoholism, although it's a disease, they talk about it being like it's rooted in selfishness. That's all that there is. When you're drinking, that's the only thing that you can think about. So all else falls away, be it, other people's needs, children, jobs, unfortunately, but it's a truth of the disease. And, one of the best aspects and best components of recovery is the ability to be of service to people again, to be a part of society, to be that friend that you couldn't be then because it was clouded in the disease, to be a parent, to be a better sister. And, that altruistic nature that you had as a result of your upbringing is like in complete opposition of what took place there. And I think that when you talk about your heart, I know for me in the 7 years that I had struggled, no matter how terrible I felt or how dark that part of my life was, I always volunteered, from, homeless shelters to convents to, rocking babies who were addicted to chemotherapy wards. Like I was constantly, and for me, I always wanted to, and I think I was trying to stay on the other side of the line, to be of service so that I wouldn't have to be served. But it really held me, and it made me hold a line. And, I think that's a really good piece of advice, not, that we're trying to give too much, is that, wow, when you can get outside of yourself and pour into other people in even the smallest way, it just helps me, And I feel like you've taken your whole career. I mean, 5,000 people that you've coached and helped, you've taken that part of your personality and really grew it out in your professional life.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying about volunteering. I've done it every year since I was 16, and not in this, I'm doing this and telling people or for the tax write-off or whatever. Just part of just the same way that you take a holiday. It's just part of life. And I think that volunteering gives us, and I think the reason I've done that is not because I'm massive. Well, I am quite altruistic. I try to be, I think, but I don't know. It's like that Jennifer on Friends, Jennifer Aniston on Friends, and she said, can anyone ever really truly be altruistic? Surely there's something in it for them. And I really believe that about volunteering. I think I get so much more out of volunteering than the project or whoever gets from me. It's it just involves you and connects you. And the word you said was connection. And the other big tip I'd give, so I'd actually say volunteering, and I love that it's action-based. So then we get outside of our thoughts, we get our physical body, which is where trauma is stored, into action, which is absolutely brilliant for behavior change and for the mind and for the body, the spirit. I also really love nature. So my two biggest health habits that are just free as a bird and so there to help, because volunteering doesn't mean, I don't know, some big organized thing. It just means, I don't know, helping your neighbor with their bins every Monday or something, thinking about someone ahead of you or ahead of your thing in your moment. And then nature, there's just nothing like it. As I've mentioned, my childhood with animals and nature, there's nothing. Nature is so restoring. And it's all gonna be coming out. It's that, we're gonna get more encouragement from the bigger voices. 5,000, but it's still a drop in the ocean compared to some of those health and wellbeing platforms that still are pushing, I don't know, pharmaceuticals and medical doctors. When actually, I think social problems need social solutions. So yeah, I definitely would recommend those two habits.
Yeah, excellent. I really appreciate you sharing parts of your personal story with listeners so that they can gain a different perspective and really just meet the mission of this podcast, which is taking a very hard situation and making something really incredible out of it, which you've absolutely done. So can you share with listeners, to tie this up, where they can connect with you throughout the week and where they can find your podcast and website?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much. This has gone quick, and I was a little nervous, I guess. I don't know if that's the word, but just yeah. So, and it's been really easy and comforting, I think, is the word that just came into my mind to speak. So thank you for that, Jessica, and for doing all that you do. In terms of my work as the health habits coach, that's the name is, it follows. So Claire George and the Health Habits Coach, whether that's on the usual main social places, you'll find me. But my podcast is the Health Habits Coach podcast, and yeah, I have twice weekly. So I have a Monday quick habit coaching, and that's actual kind of action-based habits and coaching across holistic health, because I am health psychology girl, and then every Thursday I have a guest expert, which Jessica was so kind and generous to come, and we had a great conversation. And so if you haven't already, then maybe you want to check that one out. It's only a few weeks ago. So check out for the episode between Jessica and myself. Yeah, but from a health habits perspective, the unintended consequences of social drinking.
The unintended consequences of social drinking. Yes, we did that. It was a wonderful conversation. Change your habits and change your behaviors and change your life. Thank you so much for being here today, Claire.
No, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into the Sober Living Stories podcast. If you have been inspired, consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who could use hope in their lives. Remember to stay tuned for more inspiring stories in the episodes to come. To view our featured author of the month or to become a guest yourself, visit www.jessicastepanovic.com.